I like to start off telling everyone like where I work. So I work at a place called CCARM, which stands for the Canadian Centre for Agri-Food Research in Health and Medicine. So that's quite a mouthful. So that's why we call it CCARM instead. And CCARM is a partnership between the federal government, so the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada that I work for, the University of Manitoba, and the St. Boniface Hospital. So there's scientists from all three of these institutions working together to study the health benefits of Canadian food products. Particularly, there's a focus on diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and immune disorders. When it's not the pandemic and I'm not working out of my basement, I work at the campus of the St. Boniface Hospital. So my lab is on the second floor of the research center, the St. Boniface Research Center, but my office is on the third floor of the Asper Institute. And that's where all the participants in any of the clinical trials that are happening at St. Boniface, that's where they go. So if you were ever going to participate in a trial, you'd come to the third floor of this beautiful building. A lot of the research that I have been doing has been focused on health claims. So health claims are those statements that you see on the labels of food that link food with health. So that's when you see Cheerios lowers cholesterol, that's one of the health claims. It's Health Canada that approves these health claims. So before that can be on any label, a company or has to convince Health Canada that that is a true statement. And it's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that enforces the rules to make sure that everyone's following the rules properly. So why are we interested in government-approved health claims? Well, it's because they educate consumers and can help them make healthy food choices as they're walking down the grocery aisle. But from the other side, if say we can say that flax lowers cholesterol, that kind of gives an incentive to the food industry to start promoting product innovation, like incorporating more flax into their food products, and then farmers can sell more flax. So it helps the farmers as well. There's a few different health claims that I've been working on, but one of them is that cholesterol lowering claim that I mentioned. So I thought a good place to start would be just talking about what is cholesterol. Although I think we get cholesterol from the foods we eat, but it's mainly produced in our body, specifically by the liver. And it's an important part of cell membranes, like the outer part of all of our cells. It's involved in the production of hormones and bile, and it's involved in the metabolism of our fat-soluble vitamins, which are the A, D, E, and K, and it insulates our nerve fibers. So it's a pretty important thing. So you might be wondering, why would we be wanting to lower cholesterol? Well, what we're talking about really is because cholesterol can't travel freely in our blood. It has to be in these carriers called lipoproteins. And there's the good cholesterol carrier is called the high density lipoprotein, or HDL, is probably what your doctors would tell you about. And it's the carrier that takes cholesterol back to the liver. And then the so-called bad cholesterol carrier is the low density lipoprotein, or LDL. And that's the carrier that takes cholesterol from the liver to the cells. And if you have too much of that, the cholesterol can build up in your arteries, and that's what increases your risk of heart attack or stroke. So we need cholesterol. It's just if you have too much of this bad cholesterol, the LDL, dumping, cholesterol into our arteries, that's where you run into problems. So cardiovascular disease is, I'm sure you've been attending lots of talks and already know that it's the #2 cause of death in Canada. It used to be #1, but now cancer is actually #1. But what we're trying to do here is one of the risk factors is that LDL cholesterol. And so if you can lower LDL cholesterol by only 5 to 8%, that means you can lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, either events or even death, by 5%. So that's why we're interested in looking at cholesterol lowering. And I think probably most people have heard wonderful things about flax. And so we were thinking, well, let's see if we can get a LDL cholesterol lowering claim for it. And so one of the parts that you have to do to give to Health Canada to convince them that this is correct is you have to do a literature search. If you go and look through all the science, all the scientific literature to find all the studies that have been published on flax and cholesterol lowering. And Health Canada has very specific things that it's looking for. Like they only want to look at studies that were done in people. So any cholesterol lowering study that was done in rats, you throw that one out. They also, for health claims specifically, they want it done in people who are relatively healthy, because it's supposed to apply to the general population. And if somebody has a disease, then they say it's more like a drug, and this is a food health claim. So you have to have generally healthy people. But when we did this literature search, there was thousands of articles that had studied flax, but there were only 7 articles that met Health Canada's criteria that looked at flaxseed and cardiovascular disease. And they all showed a consistent LDL cholesterol lowering effect. And they tested, most of the studies were between 25 and 50 grams per day, but the vast majority were closer to the 50 grams, like the 40 and 50 gram dose. So from all these studies, there were some gaps that Health Canada likes to know the answer to before they approve a health claim. But what I found most interesting is usually in science, there's a definite bias where usually most of the science is done on men. And it's just, they always just recruit men and that's what they do. I think because women are more complicated. But for some reason in the flax research, the vast majority of these, I think almost all 7 of these articles were done in postmenopausal women. So that was a first. But one of the gaps was there was no evidence in men or premenopausal women. So in our study, we wanted to make sure we had both men and women included, and they wanted to know what the minimum effective dose was. So kind of how low can you go? Because most science, like we kind of give like a ton of stuff to make sure that it works. But this one was designed to see how low we could go. So what we did was we ended up with 63 healthy adults. It was almost half men and half women that were non-smokers, and their LDL cholesterol levels were high, but not high enough to be on medication. So anything above 5 millimole per liter, your doctor would probably put you on a statin or something. So these are slightly high, but not high enough to be on medication. We were looking for people between the ages of 30 and 65, so that was the range, but on average, the people in the study were about 50. This was a multi-center trial. So we had people from, just under half were from Toronto, and just over half were from Winnipeg here, and came to that Asper Institute. And just a side note, just to let you guys know, whenever somebody's doing a clinical trial, they are supposed to register their trial on a publicly available website. So register means like you say what your study design is and what you're going to do. So if you are interested in knowing what studies are happening in Winnipeg or what studies are happening on flax, you can go to this website, clinicaltrials.gov, and you can search there to see what studies have been happening or have happened. In this particular trial, this is our registration number, but just in case you were interested in seeing what was happening in the research world. Our study we did, it was called a randomized controlled crossover trial, so which is kind of the gold standard in clinical trials. So I'll explain that a little bit more. But basically, our study had 3 phases. So each phase lasted 4 weeks, and the order of the treatments was random. So in each phase, participants ate 1 muffin per day. So they either got a muffin that had 0 grams of flax, a muffin that had 20 grams of flax, or a muffin that had 30 grams of flax. And then each phase was separated by 4 to 8 weeks. So if you were in this study, in phase 1, maybe you got randomized to receive the 0 gram muffin. So you'd show up at the clinical site, and we'd give you enough muffins to eat 1 per day for a week. You go home and do that. For 4 weeks. And then you'd have a month or 2 off. And then you come in and then you get the 20 gram muffin for a month. Have a month or 2 off, and then you'd have your last muffin. And then say somebody else was in the study, they would get their muffins probably in a different order. So maybe they'd get the 30 gram muffins first, and then the 20 grams in the second phase, and the 0 grams in the final phase. So that's why it's randomized, because the order that these treatments are received in is random. It's controlled because we have a muffin, it's called the control muffin, because it doesn't have any flax. So that's what really we're comparing our treatments to. And it's a crossover design because the same person gets all of the different treatments. The other option, it's called a parallel design. So that would be if you signed up and then you randomly got assigned to the 0 gram and that's all you got. So the crossover design is a little stronger if you can do it, because you have the same person that gets all of these all the treatments. So at the beginning and end of each phase, we collected a bunch of information. We did blood pressure, waist circumference, percent body fat. We asked the participants to write down everything they eat for 3 days, so the 3-day food records, and we collected blood and urine. So we did all of these measurements at the beginning and end of each phase. But in this presentation, I'm only going to present to you some of the blood results. So I thought I'd focus on the main, so when you're talking about cardiovascular risk factors, things that affect your risk of getting a cardiovascular disease, these are usually the things that your doctor are most interested in, but they're interested in knowing this stuff. So they want to know your LDL cholesterol, they want to know your HDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, triglycerides, that's how much fat is in your blood, and this is high sensitivity C reactive protein. So that is a marker of inflammation. So that's what I'm going to show you the results that we found for that. And then also we measured alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. So what that is, it's one of those, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about omega-3 fats. So flax is really high in this particular omega-3 fat, ALA. So I thought it was a good marker of making sure that people were eating the muffins. And then in this study, what we do is, we measure all these outcomes. So the LDL cholesterol was our primary outcome. And then we use statistics to decide if there was an effect or not.
Join meeting.
So for our statistics, we were interested in, was there an effect of our treatment? So was there a difference between the 0 gram, 20 gram, and 30 gram on LDL cholesterol? Because we had both men and women in there, we were also interested in seeing, was there a difference between men and women on LDL cholesterol? Because we had 2 different sites, we could look at there a difference in Winnipeg versus Toronto. And then what these little stars here are, those are called interactions. So those are kind of interesting to look at, because you want to see this treatment by sex interaction. That's to see if men responded differently to Flax than women, or if people in Winnipeg responded differently to the Flax than people in Toronto. So that's kind of our statistical approach for all of these analyses. So this is how all of my graphs are going to look like. In this top corner, I put all of the results from the stats. Whenever you see a p-value that's less than 0.05, that means it was different, that there was a statistical effect. And then these bars here, so these ones that are like dotted or have these lines, these are the measurements that happened at baseline. And then the solid bars are what happened at the final measurement of each phase. So the white is when they had the control muffin, or the 0 gram. So this was at the beginning, and then this was at the end for the 0 gram. The light blue is 20 grams, and then the dark blue is after eating 30 grams. So when you see these little stars, that means that they are different from the other ones. So when there's 1 star here, that means that the 20 gram Flax was different from the control. And because there's 2 stars here, that means that the 30 gram is different from both the 0 and the 20 grams. So basically what this results here are telling you is that when people ate the 20 gram muffins of Flax, they had higher ALA than compared to the 0 gram. And when they had 30 grams, they had even higher levels of ALA. So that's that omega-3 fat, which is excellent to see, because it kind of shows that these people were probably actually eating the muffins. So we didn't actually watch them eat the muffins. They got the muffins to eat at home. So this was exciting to see. And then we went to our primary outcome of the LDL cholesterol, and I was devastated because there was no effect of Flax. Just kind of stayed the same, even at 20 grams or 30 grams. Another way to look at these results is to see how it changed. So here, this little triangle means change from baseline. So it basically took the base, like whatever value they had at baseline, and subtracted what they had at final. So you can see here, when people had control muffins, kind of hovered around 0. If anything, it might have gone up a little bit. When they ate the 20 grams, pretty much stayed at 0. And at the 30 grams, it seemed like there was a decrease of about 3%. Now, remember, what we designed the study to see was a 5 to 8% decrease in LDL cholesterol, because that's where you see at least a 5% decrease in the risk of cardiovascular disease events or death. And other foods that have this health claim approved for it, like that's why you see on Cheerios the LDL cholesterol, it's because of the oats. So they had been shown to lower cholesterol by 5 to 8%. Just to put that in perspective, statins lower LDL cholesterol by 50%. So there's a much bigger effect with statins. But here, so we were only seeing about a 3% decrease. So that's probably why it wasn't statistically significant, because we were designed to look at a 5%. Of course, after I finished this study, Health Canada actually did approve a health claim for flax for lowering LDL cholesterol, but you have to eat 40 grams per day, which probably makes sense. That's kind of what we were seeing here. Like, just if you just needed to eat a little bit more, and probably it would get to that if we had done it in this study. So turns out you needed 40 grams per day. When we looked at the good cholesterol, so this is the HDL, we did see a statistical lowering, which would technically not be good, but this is such a small difference. And really, you want to keep your HDL cholesterol really like above 0.9. And all of these were above that. So this little bit of change, even though it's a statistical difference, I don't think it's a clinical one. Like, none of the doctors would be too upset about a little bit of a decrease here. And so total cholesterol, no difference. And then triglycerides, no difference. And the same thing with that inflammatory marker, high sensitivity CRP. So it was a whole lot of no effect, which is pretty hard when you go into designing these studies and you recruit all these people and you do all this work and it just doesn't pan out. But that is typical of science. And then after I was moping around for a bit, one of my colleagues who was from agriculture came up to me and said, you know, Heather, it's very well known in agriculture, like that chickens, if you feed them a diet that's based on like a flaxseed meal, they have poor growth and end up with a vitamin B6 deficiency. So farmers supplement, if they're feeding their chickens a flax-based diet, they supplement their chickens with vitamin B6. And so I found that kind of interesting because that's not something that we knew in the nutrition world, the human nutrition world. So basically I looked into it, and flaxseed contains a compound called linotine. And they named it linotine because actually the other name for flaxseed is linseed. So linotine, when we eat it, so linotine's in the flax, when we eat it, our body breaks it down into 1-amino-D-proline, or 1-ADP. Now 1-ADP binds pyroxyl 5-phosphate, or PLP, and PLP is the active form of B6. So basically this linotine is interfering with vitamin B6 activity. Now, vitamin B6 is a cofactor in many reactions in our body. So whenever we're metabolizing proteins and sugars and fat, the enzymes that are needed to do that, a lot of them also use B6. So I thought, well, maybe we can explore this in our study. So what we did was we measured markers of vitamin B6 status in these people who were eating either 0 grams, 20 grams, or 30 grams per day for a month. So we measured the plasma PLP, which is the active form of vitamin B6. And I was thinking, well, it should go down if there's impaired vitamin B6 status, so if the linotine is interfering with it. The other thing that we could measure was plasma homocysteine. Now, homocysteine is one of these amino acids that goes up if we don't have enough vitamin B6. And if you have too much homocysteine, it's actually a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So just like if you have too much LDL cholesterol, it's not good for your blood vessels, the same thing with homocysteine. So that was kind of concerning. So I thought that's a good one for us to measure, because if the linotine was interfering with how B6 was going, we might see high levels of homocysteine. And then we were also able to measure, this is another liver enzyme, AST. And so if the vitamin B6 status was impaired, we'd see lower activity of this enzyme. So we did the same approach, same stats and everything. So when we looked at the active form of vitamin B6, we actually did not see an effect of flax on that. So that was good. But then I was just kind of curious because I didn't know, I wanted to know how many people in our study would be considered vitamin B6 deficient. So there's two different ways to, so there, if you're vitamin B6 deficient, that means your levels of PLP in the blood are less than 20 nanomoles per liter. And so there was about 15% of our population would have met that criteria. And just a marginal B6 deficiency is if you had the PLP values between 20 and 30. And so there was another 15 in there. So there's about 30% of our population, the people that participated in this study, had low vitamin B6 status, which just kind of interesting to me. But then when we measured homocysteine, this was shocking. And it was one of those things that my technician could guess what group people were assigned to based on the homocysteine levels. So what these are telling you here is that when people ate 20 grams or 30 grams of flax per day, their homocysteine levels went up. And so I was thinking like, okay, remember I told you about that statistical difference versus clinical difference. So this is a statistical difference, but then I'm like, okay, what level does homocysteine levels start causing a problem? Well, to be hyperhomocystemic, it's anything over 15 micromolar per liter. And so I looked at, and at baseline, it was anywhere between 3 to 8% of the people in the study had homocysteine levels in the hyperhomocystemia range. And then it pretty much stayed the same if they ate, the control muffin. But when they ate the 20 gram or the 30 gram, there went from 3% to 33% of the population. So that's 30% of these people. So if we actually went to the numbers, so that's like 3% of this population were 2 people were in the hyperhomocystemia range, and then 21 people were in the hyperhomocystemia range. So that's 19 people went from being in the normal range to being too high. And for the 30 grams, it was, we started off with 4 people and then ended up with 16. So there were 12 people that went from being in the normal range to being in the high. And then the other marker that we were looking at was that liver enzyme. And so we did see also a lowering of the activity of that enzyme. So with the homocystemia, with the homocysteine results and this, it does show that in 20 grams of flax does interfere with the activity of the vitamin B6. So my conclusions, if I was going to bring it right back to my title, the good part is that flax can lower LDL cholesterol. We have a Health Canada approved health claim. But the bad news is you have to eat 40 grams per day to do that. And I just realized I never really told you how much 30 grams is. I measured it out because I had some flax at home. So it's about a third of a cup and like another half tablespoon. So it's a lot of flax to be eating like in a day. And the ugly is, say you're trying to eat 40 grams per day, but you just can't quite get that much in, and you only get to 20 grams per day. You might not be seeing that cholesterol lowering effect, but you might be seeing affecting your vitamin B6 status. So the questions that I want to answer next are, I wonder can we process Linotine out of flax? Like if the Linotine is in the meal, and we can dehull it and take the hull and it has the fiber, and we can get rid of the Linotine, then we can solve that problem. Or can we just be like, are we like chickens? And can we just supplement, like eat more B6 along with our flax, and that would help prevent the problems with the homocysteine levels. So those are questions still to be answered. Just wanted to make sure I acknowledged, because you never do science all by yourself. So this study was done with colleagues from the University of Manitoba, the AFC, the federal government, the hospital, and the University of Toronto. And we had technicians involved in developing the food products that we used, and obviously recruiting all the participants and analyzing all the samples. And we can't do this research without volunteers. That's actually the hardest part of any clinical trial, are finding volunteers to come and participate. And all the funding for this came from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And, oh, I went too far. Oops. This is just, it's actually a few years old now, but that's a picture of my daughter in a flax field. I figure that's a good place to end.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Heather. There was one question that came very early, so I don't know, Ken, if maybe it got answered, but I'll share it with everybody. If I take Lipitor, is taking flax going to make a difference? Can you quantify in percent flax is better than Lipitor? So you did speak about that.
Yeah. So I think statins will lower your cholesterol, like it's usually about 50% is what most doctors would expect. And with food products, like we're looking at 5 to 8% lowering. If you're already taking a statin and then you add in flax, will it lower it even more? I don't know. In my study, none of the people were taking cholesterol medication, so I can't really comment on that based on the evidence that I have.
That's fair. Any other questions that anybody has? Again, if you want to use the chat box like Ken did earlier, so thanks Ken for using that chat box, you can just enter your questions in. I will definitely say I learned a lot more about flax than I ever thought I would tonight, so thank you for that, Heather. And it kind of took me on a bit of a journey. Initially, I was planning on making flax muffins and I was going to eat them every day, and then based on your I thought maybe not. Maybe I need to change my method. So that was a great presentation. It definitely kept me on the edge of my seat, wondering what I was going to do with my flax intake. So lots of good info to take home and hopefully to process and see how we can apply that to make things better for our dietary life. So
Heather, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, you said a third of a cup, roughly a third of a cup.
Yeah.
That was for your 30% or 30 gram muffin, or your 20?
So a third of a cup, when I weighed it out, if it's not quite full, that's like 30 grams.
Okay.
And then if you want to get to the 40, which is the Health Canada, like you got to add another half a tablespoon. Yeah, this is the ground flax. I should tell you that. It was the ground flax. So we weren't giving, like, it was whole ground flax.
Yeah. Now, has there been any research on the how much the 40 gram muffin reduces your vitamin B6?
No. I think we're the first ones to actually measure it. Yeah, to actually look at the vitamin B6 in humans. We were the first ones.
And what kind of a population are you looking at that Health Canada would consider the numbers of people you have to, how should I say, sometimes the smaller the number, the more greater the chance of error, because I've done research and stuff. And what would Health Canada consider a really good study to support the findings? Would it be something like you need maybe 1,000 people? Do you have an idea what kind of a number?
Yeah, so Health Canada really, they want to see those randomized controlled trials, so that study design. And then you always have to come up with, you have to justify the number of people that you need in the study by doing a sample size calculation. It's like a statistics thing. And that's based on how much of a difference you're expecting to see. And then how much variation there is. So it all depends on, like, so for this study, because there actually is quite a bit of variation in LDL cholesterol, and we wanted to see we wanted to see like a fairly small change, like, the 5%. That's why we needed about 63 to 64 people in each group to pick up that much of a difference. Like if we had more people, so maybe if we had 100 people, maybe we would have seen that statistic difference between the groups, but it's only a 3% difference. Does that make sense? What I'm saying here? With the homocysteine, that's a much bigger difference we were seeing. So we wouldn't even need that many.
What would be your recommendation for somebody taking, say, 40 milligram, a high dosage of rosuvastatin, which is, it's the highest dose you can get? If you're already taking that, then for what benefit you might gain out of taking the extra flax, it might be on cautious or on the safe side, maybe not to take the flax.
So I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know what to say. And I'm actually not a dietitian either. I did do my PhD in nutrition, but I never went through, I didn't do my registered dietitian internship.
It was my doctor who recommended wouldn't hurt to take some extra flax. And he already knows that I'm on the highest dosage I can get of rosuvastatin. But but I don't know, this seems very new. Are you the first study that has actually substantiated that the vitamin B6 decreased?
Yes. Yeah, so he probably doesn't know that I found this out.
So there'll have to be more research to substantiate it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, to show.
Good.
Yeah. So it's kind of exciting.
All right. Well, I don't know. I guess
I know it's hard.
Decision. I'm thinking I'm taking it every day, adding it to cereal.
Yeah.
And but on the other hand, that's the other part of your study. My wife says she takes extra B vitamin. You might have to counterbalance the effect, take more vitamin B6 supplement.
Yeah, and that could be like, if that's all it is, if we're like the chickens and we just have, like, that's an easy fix, right? We can take a pill. Or I did have dietary sources. So you can get a decent amount, like you could, maybe we have it with a banana, like, or with turkey, like maybe that helps too. That would be the easiest fix.
Well, I do have I have it with my cereal with a banana.
There you go. Who knows?
I'm already counterbalancing.
Yeah, because this wasn't, when I designed this study, that I didn't know about this. It wasn't until I was done that it was one of my colleagues that said, "Hey, Heather, like, you should be looking at the vitamin B6 status." And I was interested. And so I did.
If you have a deficiency in vitamin B6, it can lead to some serious problems. What are some of the major problems with a deficient B6? What would be some of the major problems?
So these are the typical symptoms of vitamin B6 deficiency. So skin rashes, I guess it's that glotitis, glossy tongue, nerve pain, mood changes, tiredness, seizures, impaired immune function, and of course this elevated homocysteine levels. Because homocysteine, if you have too high homocysteine levels, that puts you at risk for cardiovascular disease too.
Okay, Ed, I'm just gonna interrupt for a second because we do have a couple people that asked a couple questions, so I want to be fair to them because they did enter them in the chat.
Thank you, Heather, for answering my questions.
Thanks. So someone was saying, I guess he's taking kind of synopsis of your presentation, Heather, but he's saying, so it sort of feels like there's not a lot of clinical benefit to eating flax. Are we just trying to justify eating flax? I feel like there's no harm, but is there a benefit? And I'm not a dietitian either, but I'm thinking there's other benefits to eating flax that kind of go beyond the cholesterol realm. And maybe you could speak to that. Maybe you know.
Yeah, I know one of my colleagues, like fiber, I mean, flax is a really good source of fiber. So that's another one, can help with laxation, like help keep you regular. So that's very important for overall health. A lot of people in the nutrition world are very interested in like the omega-3 fats, and that might be a benefit. And flax is a good source of that. But yeah, back to the fiber, it might help. Like I haven't done any of these studies, but just anything that's high in fiber, it probably will help keep your blood sugar levels more steady.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all.
There's lots of potential.
Right. Yeah, and someone just said, I guess they were instructed or kind of have read to put like 2 tablespoons of flax on their oatmeal in the morning, and we thought it did in combination with cinnamon and oats to lower the cholesterol, and they were kind of wondering if it's still worth it. And I would say yes, there's other health benefits to doing that. That's a good healthy breakfast, but maybe you can speak to that in more detail.
Yeah, well, once again, I'm not a dietitian,
Yep.
but oats do have that health claim as well on them. So that, and I'm not aware of any anti-nutrient parts with oats, but so that's definitely a good start. What I have for breakfast every morning is I have oats, and then, but I don't put flax on mine. I put chia seeds. I put a tablespoon of chia seeds because that's another source of ALA and fiber. But yeah.
Good variety. Sounds like our participants need to have a chat with maybe our dietitian. They seem to have lots of burning questions about, which is great. And we do have a dietitian who can help. So I'm going to give everybody maybe a minute or two. We're getting to 7:45. So just want to make sure everything's good and questions are answered. Again, I want to say thank you, Heather, for taking time out in your evening, in your basement, trying to keep your daughter away. I get that as well. Someone just asked quick, what about flax oil? I guess, is there a difference between flax oil and ground flax? Great question, Jan.
Yeah. So this linotine is actually a water-soluble part, so it would not be in the oil. So if you just have the oil, there would be no linotine in there, so you wouldn't have these effects on the vitamin B6. But what's not in the oil is the fiber. So you'd be missing out. And I think it's probably the fiber that's having the effect on the cholesterol. But
yeah, makes sense.
So that is an important part. Yeah. No problems with the vitamin B6 if you're just having the oil.
Okay. So again, thank you. We do have another talk next week. So you get the weekend off, and then I'm back with everybody on Tuesday. We've got Dr. Rabinder Singh joining us, and he's going to talk to us about physical activity and the heart, and is being a couch potato giving us heart disease. And I think this pandemic's probably made a little bit more couch potatoes out of most people. So I think that'll be an interesting talk. With that, I will wish everybody a great evening, a great weekend. The weather's getting warmer, so get out there and be active, and take your flax in stride, maybe is what I say. Thanks a lot, Heather. Okay, see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.